Abraham Lincoln was born in a log cabin in Kentucky. He had little formal education but was an avid reader. He worked as a shopkeeper and surveyor before pursuing a career in law. He served in the Illinois State Legislature and the U.S. House of Representatives before being elected president in 1860. As president, Lincoln faced the secession of several U.S. states and the outbreak of the Civil War. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, declaring slaves in the Confederate-held territories to be free. He was reelected in 1864 and oversaw the Union's victory in the Civil War. However, he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth just days after the war ended. Now, let's simulate the conversation with Lincoln. Remember, these responses are AI generated and should not be taken as Lincoln's actual words or beliefs. Welcome, President Lincoln. It's not every day someone gets to interview a president, let alone one of your stature. No pressure, right? So let's start with the famous Emancipation Proclamation. Could you explain your decision to issue it and its significance?
Well, I must say it's not every day I get interviewed in the 21st century. Your technology is quite impressive. Now on to your question about the Emancipation Proclamation. Issued on January 1st, 1863, it declared that all enslaved persons in the Confederate-held territory shall be then thenceforward and forever free. This decision was both strategic, aiming to weaken the Confederacy, which relied heavily on slave labor, and morale, rooted in my belief in the inherent dignity and equality of all people. While the proclamation did not immediately free all slaves, as it applied only to areas under Confederate control, it fundamentally transformed the character of the war and set the stage for the eventual abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment. In essence, it made clear that the war was not just about preserving the Union, but also about ending the institution of slavery. It was a step towards fulfilling the promise of the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal.
So on the Civil War, and you being president at this time, it was one of the most challenging periods in American history. How did you navigate these challenges?
The Civil War was indeed one of the most challenging periods in our nation's history. It was a time of great division and conflict, but also a time of profound change and transformation. As president, my primary goal was to preserve the Union. I believed that the Union was perpetual and that no state had the right to secede. I was willing to take whatever measures were necessary to keep the country united, including the use of military force. But preserving the Union was not just a matter of military strategy. It also required political skill and moral leadership. I had to navigate complex political dynamics, manage differing opinions within my own administration, and maintain the support of the public. Throughout the war, I sought to articulate a vision of the Union that was worth fighting for. I emphasized the ideals of liberty, equality, and democracy, and I made clear that the war was not just about preserving the Union, but also about ending the institution of slavery. The challenges were immense and the cost in lives was tragic, but in the end, the Union was preserved and slavery was abolished. The Civil War was a test of our nation's values and resilience, and I believe we emerged stronger and more united.
So you're often cited as one of the greatest leaders in history. What do you believe is the most important qualities of a good leader?
Leadership is a complex endeavor, and it requires a range of skills and qualities. However, if I were to highlight a few key attributes, they would be as follows. Firstly, a good leader must have a clear vision. They must understand where they want to lead their people and be able to articulate this vision in a way that inspires others to follow. Secondly, a good leader must have integrity. They must be honest, trustworthy, and consistent in their actions. They must be willing to do what is right even when it is difficult or unpopular. Thirdly, a good leader must have empathy. They must be able to understand and share the feelings of others. This allows them to connect with people on a deeper level and to make decisions that take into account the needs and experiences of those they lead. Lastly, a good leader must have resilience. They will inevitably face challenges and setbacks, but they must be able to persevere, to learn from their mistakes, and to keep moving forward. These are just a few of the qualities that I believe are important in a leader. But ultimately, the measure of a leader is not in their personal qualities, but in the impact they have on the world and the lives of those they lead.
You've described democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people. Could you elaborate on what this means to you?
Indeed, in my Gettysburg Address, I described democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people. This phrase encapsulates my belief in the fundamental principles of democracy. Of the people signifies that the source of government power is the people themselves. The government is not an entity separate from the people, but is made up of individuals chosen by the citizens. By the people means that the people are active participants in the government. They exercise their power through voting, expressing their opinions, and holding their representatives accountable. For the people implies that the purpose of government is to serve the interests of the people, to protect their rights, and to promote their welfare. The government exists not for its own sake, but for the benefit of the citizens. In a democracy, every citizen has a voice and a role to play. It is a system that values equality, freedom, and the rule of law. But it also requires active participation, civic responsibility, and a commitment to the common good. This vision of democracy is not just a political system, but a way of life. It is about the kind of society we want to live in and the kind of people we want to be.
So you played a crucial role in the abolishing of slavery. Could you share your thoughts on the institution and why you believed it was important to end it?
Slavery was a deeply entrenched institution in the United States at the time of my presidency, and it was the primary cause of the division between the North and the South. I believed it to be morally wrong, a violation of the basic principles of liberty and equality upon which our nation was founded. In my view, every person has a natural right to the fruits of their own labor, and slavery was a violation of this right. It was a system that treated people not as individuals with their own rights and dignity, but as property that could be bought and sold. The abolition of slavery was not just a moral imperative, but also a necessary step towards preserving the Union. The conflict over slavery was tearing the nation apart, and it was clear that the United States could not continue to exist half slave and half free. The Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, were important steps towards realizing the promise of the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. But the struggle for equality and justice did not end with the abolition of slavery. It is a struggle that continues to this day, and it is the responsibility of each generation to carry it forward.
Your Gettysburg Address is one of the most famous speeches in American history. Can you tell us more about the context of this speech and what are the key messages?
The Gettysburg Address was delivered on November 19, 1863, at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a few months after the Battle of Gettysburg, one of the deadliest battles of the Civil War. The speech was brief, consisting of just 272 words, but its message was profound. I began by invoking the principles of liberty and equality set forth in the Declaration of Independence. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. I then paid tribute to the soldiers who had given their lives at Gettysburg, describing their sacrifice as a fitting and proper way to dedicate the cemetery. But I also emphasized that the ultimate responsibility for ensuring that their sacrifice was not in vain rested with the living. The key message of the Gettysburg Address was a call to action, a call to continue the work of the soldiers who had fought and died at Gettysburg. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. I closed the speech with a vision of a new birth of freedom and a reaffirmation of the democratic ideals upon which the nation was founded. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Gettysburg Address is not just a historical document, but a timeless statement of the values and ideals that define our nation.
You face many personal and political challenges throughout your life. How did these experiences shape your perspective and your leadership?
Indeed, my life was marked by a series of personal and political challenges, each of which shaped me in different ways. From a young age, I faced the harsh realities of frontier life. My family was poor, and we had to work hard just to survive. I had little formal education, but I was an avid reader and taught myself as much as I could. These early experiences instilled in me a strong work ethic, a love of learning, and a deep empathy for those who struggle. I also faced personal tragedy. I lost my mother at a young age and later my sister. As an adult, I lost 2 of my own children. These experiences with loss and grief deepened my empathy and shaped my understanding of the human condition. Politically, my presidency was marked by the immense challenge of the Civil War. Leading the nation through this crisis required not only strategic and political skill, but also moral leadership. I had to make difficult decisions, often in the face of intense criticism and opposition, but I remained committed to the cause of preserving the Union and ending slavery. These experiences shaped my perspective and leadership in profound ways. They taught me resilience, empathy, and the importance of moral courage. They also reinforced my belief in the ideals of democracy, equality, and human dignity, and my commitment to making these ideals a reality for all people.
Mr. President, is there anything you'd like to close out this conversation with, or anything you'd like to tell the world?
If I were to leave you with a final thought, it would be this. Democracy is more than a form of government. It is a commitment to the principles of liberty, equality, and human dignity. It is a belief in the power of ordinary people to shape their own destiny. In times of division and conflict, it is easy to lose sight of these principles, but it is precisely in these times that we must hold on to them most tightly. We must remember that our strength lies not in our uniformity, but in our diversity, not in our certainty, but in our willingness to question and learn. We must also remember that democracy is not a given, but a responsibility. It requires the active participation of all citizens. It requires us to listen to each other, to respect our differences, and to find common ground. Finally, we must remember that the work of democracy is never finished. Each generation must take up the task of building a more perfect union. This is our greatest challenge and our greatest hope. Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts. I hope they will inspire you to continue the work of democracy, to strive for a more just and equal society, and to uphold the dignity and worth of every individual.
Mr. President, it's been an absolute honor to have you in this conversation with us today. Your insights into the challenges of your time, your leadership, your unwavering commitment to the principles of democracy and equality have left an incredible mark on our nation's history. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Stay tuned for more conversations with some of history's most influential figures. And remember, the wisdom of the past can still illuminate our path forward. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.